You're listening to the More Than a Worship Leader podcast. Here's your host, Gary Durbin.
Welcome to the More Than a Worship Leader podcast, where we talk about worship ministry in the local church. Today with me is John Miller. He's an author, speaker, and founder of QBQ Inc., an organizational development firm based in Colorado dedicated to helping organizations make personal accountability a core value.
True.
A 1980 graduate of Cornell University, John has been involved in the training and speaking industry since 1986. He lives
Makes me old. I know what you're saying, Gary. You're making me old here, okay?
I said nothing like that. He lives in Denver, Colorado with his wife, Karen. They have seven children and lots of grandkids. So welcome, John, to the podcast.
Yeah, great to be on here. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So we got to talk a little bit before the podcast. Sounds like life and family are going well. There's always the hard things of life, but overall, you guys are doing well.
Yep, we're good. We're in Colorado, been here 28 years now. We have, out of our 7 kids, let's see, 5 of them live here in the state. One's in Connecticut, one's in Minnesota. Of the 15 grandchildren, 11 of them are here in Colorado within 15 miles of us. So we get a lot of grandkid time, and the business is still humming along. QBQ Incorporated, we can be found at qbq.com. And we just continue trucking along, doing training and speaking and selling books, all on one principle, which I'll let you introduce.
Yes, sir. Well, our background is meeting in Denver when I was at a church there, and I had the privilege of meeting 2 of your son-in-laws, and I consider them friends, Eric and Ricardo. So I've kept in touch with them. I actually had a phone call with Ricardo maybe a year or 2 ago. Just got to catch up with him, but
Good.
yeah, just really appreciate your family and all that you guys represent, man.
Well, Ricardo now has 5 kids, and they're going a little crazy, I think, right now. The youngest is 9 months old, and it's been a challenge. But hey, that was a choice, right? They chose to have 5 kids.
The Bible says that children are a blessing from the Lord. That's what we say in those
Most
moments.
days they are.
So I listened to your podcast. I've listened to a few episodes. One of the ones I listened to recently was telling your background story, which I really enjoyed listening to. And you are a pastor's kid, right?
I am. Yep. So I was born in 1958 in Ithaca, New York, and in the late 70s started dating a girl named Karen, and we married in 1980. She was 19, I was 22, and we're still married. It'll be 46 years this year. And my dad was her pastor, as well as my pastor, of course. So my dad married us. He stood up there and married us. And he was also a Cornell wrestling coach, NCAA, Ivy League, Cornell for 26 years. So I grew up in a very interesting home. He was both a wrestling coach and a pastor. So every day I would get out of bed and I would basically think to myself, which one will he be today? Will he be the loving, grace-filled, forgiving Christian pastor, or the wrestling coach with the big biceps? So his background definitely shaped my life, of course. And here I am today as a speaker and a guy who likes to sell. And my dad used to say that he wasn't a salesperson, but of course he was selling the biblical message of salvation every day. And of course, he was selling young wrestlers on being disciplined and working hard. So he definitely was a salesperson. I have a lot of his personality in me. So that's kind of where I came from. My mom, I don't mention my mom much, primarily because sadly, when I just before I turned 17, she died of a cerebral an aneurysm. She died of an aneurysm one day, and at age 51. And of course, she shaped my life too. But from the age of 16, 17 on, I had no mother. So most of my stories are about my dad, to be honest with you.
Mm. So here's a question for you. Do you consider yourself an author or a speaker first?
I've done a lot of interviews, and nobody has ever asked that question before. That's profound. I mean it, because I think one reason, if I could put this mildly, I succeeded as an author selling books is because I was a salesperson first. I joined a company in 1986 where I was selling management training. And what that meant, Gary, is I had to knock on doors, usually by phone, Back then, there was no LinkedIn, there was no email. It was just calling executives all day long and asking for an appointment. Hey, can I see you next Tuesday at 2 p.m.? Can I see you Thursday at 8 a.m.? And I did that for 10 years. So I was very much a salesperson, and I would facilitate the training that I would sell them. I was representing another author. So I would sell the training and then facilitate the sessions. So I was both selling and working live with a group, standing up in front of them. I mean, you're a worship leader. You know what it's like to stand in front of an audience. After a while, hopefully you get pretty good at it. And after about 10 years of selling that training for another author, I decided to go out on my own and become a speaker. One day I just dubbed myself keynote speaker, but I was still a salesperson. So I was selling engagements left and right. I happened to get an engagement with a little tiny company called State Farm. And that turned into 72 engagements because I was calling all the executives around State Farm's organization. And I was doing all this speaking, but I was a salesperson first, then a speaker. Then I became an author because I was out speaking one day for State Farm in Charlottesville, Virginia. And two people rushed up to me during a break and they said, "You have got to put this material into a book." And I remember saying, yeah, I know. Others have told me that. I'm not a writer. I'm not an author. But within 6 months, we had QBQ, the book, on the market. And we just took off. People wanted to read about it as well as hear about it. So I was a salesperson first, a speaker second, and an author third.
I think the thread with all that and knowing you and your heart with all this is that you have a message. And so when you have a message and you want to get it to people, you're pretty much open to whatever avenues there, that there is: a podcast, a YouTube channel, a
Mm-hmm.
book. I remember you were so gracious to meet me at Starbucks and give me advice on writing my first book. And that, which is this is the podcast we're on right now, More Than a Worship Leader.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just had that message, burning in me. And one of the things I thought about, and one of my desires is I really want to help worship leaders,
Yeah.
and especially young worship leaders. And so honestly, my first thought was I'd love to get in this conference circuit and get some workshops. But then that's hard to get into. But then I was realizing, man, I love to write. Let me write a book. And then it all started clicking, like, oh, if I have a book, that it's amazing what doors that opens, for you.
Well, it's interesting when you look at the QBQ book, and this is the sixth edition. I always have a hard time saying sixth. The sixth edition right here with the white jacket, it's very much a reflection of my speaking. Again, in the late 90s, I'm out speaking and people were saying, you need to write a book on this. And we basically took my framework for a keynote speech and put it into the book. And it came out. It's an easy read, it's an hour and a quarter for most people. It's short chapters, a bunch of humor, lots of stories. And just to give your audience a feel, the message is personal accountability. You said it's good to have a message and doors open for you and you have passion for it. Absolutely. Personal accountability. I consider myself a blame detector. And I detect it in myself. Okay. We teach in the book, we tend to teach to others what we need to hear ourselves. I'm going to say that again. We tend to teach to other people what we need to hear ourselves. And I came out of, quite honestly, my family could be called dysfunction junction back in the 60s and the 70s. And I won't go into detail, but I could have that propensity to blame, whine, play victim, point fingers, procrastinate, waiting for others to take action. And then one day I developed this message called QBQ, the question behind the question, and just started teaching it and showing people how to become accountable. So quick example, let's just take the corporate world for a sec. Instead of asking, why do we have to go through all this change? Let's ask, how can I adapt to the changing world? Instead of asking, when is that department going to do its job right? How about asking, what can I do to be my best today? Instead of asking, when is someone going to train me? Let's ask, how can I develop myself, my own God-given talent? So if you hear those QBQ questions I just shared, the question behind the question, they're all bringing them back to me. They're all coming back to me. It's all about personal ownership and accountability. And boy, does the world need personal accountability right now. But it does begin with John Miller. I need it first.
I believe that message is really important to your personal growth and to the people who work with you. But one, one thing I've learned is that it does rub people. I like I'm taking a few people through that book right now, or
Thank
actually
you.
I should say two. I have a few people that report to me and that I'm developing. And so it's been awesome. It's been cool to take some Gen Zers through this book lately.
Oh,
And
wow.
one of them told me, and they're getting a lot out of it. They love it. And one of them told me that they had the book on their desk and somebody walked by and picked it up and like, what is this? And they told them about it and they're like, eh, and they put it down. It was like,
I don't
it wasn't
need that.
exact. Well, I think the reaction is, I don't want that. It's like,
Yeah,
you know,
oh,
it,
good
it
point.
I think it probably, I think it does rub people who don't want to be accountable to themselves. So,
Right. Well, let
uh,
me let me tell you a quick story. I spoke at my alma mater a few years ago, Cornell University, to a bunch of students. An evening session. They looked bored to tears. I tried to make it fun. I'm in my 60s at that time, and of course they're thinking I'm out of touch. Thanks, boomer. That kind of stuff. But when I was done, a young man named Gabriel came up to me and he almost whispered as he looked around. He basically said, I'll just condense what he said. I can't use your message here, or I would no longer be part of the group. Meaning, I need to be offended. I need a safe space. I need to complain. I need to whine. I strive for social justice and point fingers at the rich people, whatever you want to call it. He was saying, if I started practicing what you just taught, no victim thinking, no blame, I would no longer have any friends. And that tells you what's going on college campuses.
wow. Mm, that's deep.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So here's a Gary opinion that I've really, uh, I should hold loosely, I'm really seeing it happening a lot in
Mm.
my life, and it keeps coming up. And here's my opinion, and I want to get your reaction to it.
Right.
I've come to the point that it's better to ask the right questions than to assume the right answers. What do you think about that? Do you think that's yeah, do you see any flaws in that thought?
Well, the only thing that caught my attention was assuming the right answers. That's where my arrogance would come in, thinking I have the answer. So I'm assuming the right answer, which is really the John answer. Like, here's an example. Recently, I mentioned to you before we started taping that one of our grandsons has been recovering from a brain tumor operation. And it's going very well. The Lord has blessed us greatly because a lot of kids don't make it, but he's 7 and he's doing wonderfully. And when he needed to go to Arizona, again, he lives in Colorado, he needed to go to Arizona for the special radiation treatments. Karen and I, my wife and I, both thought his whole family should not go. We just thought it was wrong. We thought the father should stay, our son-in-law should stay here with the other 2 older kids, keep things normal, go to school, play with friends. And, Tara, our daughter, and Liam with the brain cancer former tumor, they removed it in January, should go to Arizona for the treatments. That we really had a strong opinion on that, Gary. Well, we only gave it to them once. I've learned only give your opinion once. And they decided they'd all uproot the whole family for 7 weeks. They all moved down to Arizona. They got a house, and it was the smartest thing they ever did. So Karen and I recently have said, we were wrong. We were wrong. Our initial assumption was you should split the family and only some of you go down there and the rest of you stay here. They went down there and they did great. They did homework online. They experienced Arizona. They went to the Mayo Clinic every day as a family. It was really a wonderful experience, other than the fact that he's dealing with cancer.
Hmm.
It's not often John will say, okay, I was wrong. But I was wrong. I made the wrong assumption and I had the wrong answer. So I have to be aware of the fact that I am very quick with my opinions. I form opinions really fast. I'm an Enneagram 8, if you know anything about Enneagram. Myers-Briggs, I'm an ESTJ. If you go back to the 80s and something called Wilson Learning Material, I'm a driver analytical. And so if you put all that personality stuff together, you get a guy who can be highly opinionated. So I've had to learn for years now to say, oops, I made the wrong assumption. I was incorrect. So it's important to ask the right questions, which is what QBQ is all about. So we can go on from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the right questions are huge, and that's what I believe this book is. That's a big message of this book is it's my takeaway from the book is really reframing your questions, making sure they're asked correctly. It's maybe thought through better with the personal accountability. I know I do
Sure.
it all. I have used it a lot as a leader, as I lead staff. I'm something doesn't go right. I'm
Yep.
avoiding that. Why did that happen? Why didn't you do that? When are you going to fix that? But I've
Right.
really approached it with, hey man, what can I do to help you make sure this doesn't happen again? Because this is important. And that's
Yep.
such a better approach for sure.
We're not in dissimilar businesses. I've seen you perform, and you are amazing. And you're on stage, and you're trying to get the audience to come with you. Well, when I'm out speaking, 2 days ago, I was in Miami doing a session. I want the audience to come with me. But it's easy to start saying, basically, why doesn't the audience laugh? Why doesn't the audience want to have fun? When are we going to get a better audience? So, in that vein, I asked my son in law, Eric, who has been a worship leader off and on for 25 years, and his wife, Kristen, my daughter, who also goes out and speaks on QBQ around the country. And she's done a lot of worship participation. She's done a lot of singing. I said, how does QBQ apply to worship leaders? And I bet you can't relate to this question. Here's the wrong question. Why does my senior pastor think he has any say in my worship set? That's the first one they gave me. Why don't our congregants engage? Why can't they let me lead them? Why won't the audience let me lead them? Why don't we get better musicians at our church? Why can't we find more skilled musicians? So it's funny. I said, hey, Eric and Kristen, how does QBQ apply to worship leading? And boy, they had some incorrect questions. They had some unaccountable questions that they wanted Gary to hear about, though he's probably heard them all.
Yeah, and I might have asked those questions too.
Right. Gary
Possibly.
might have asked us. Well, it's like
Possibly.
as a speaker, I've been out speaking professionally since 1995. And trust me, the easiest thing to do is to blame the audience. Instead of turning it around, QBQ, the question behind the question, accountability, and say, what can I do to be more creative? How can I improve my skills? What can I do to get the audience to engage? What can I do to change me? That's what QBQ is all about.
That's great. I've also learned too, I've learned it very slowly, but I've learned that I don't know what's going on in people's minds or hearts.
Absolutely.
I can't see that. And sometimes their emotions and face don't portray it correctly. So I
Mm.
might be leading worship or speaking, and I've had people with their arms crossed and almost glaring at me, and then they'll come up to me afterwards and tell me how impactful that was for them.
Oh, Gary, we are really in the same business. The first year I started way back in the 80s, and I'm running a workshop with my manager there coaching me. I will never forget it. We were doing a group of 12 car dealers this is where I started my career in Minneapolis, St. Paul, doing training, sales management training. Anyway, there was a guy who sat there for 2 days like this, with arms crossed across his chest, looking defiant. A week after the seminar, I went over to that car dealer, talked to the general manager, and he said, you know who loved your session the most? You know who's using the content the most? Yep. It was the guy whose arms were crossed for 2 days. So we have to be careful as worship leaders and speakers not to make any assumptions about the audience.
That's right. That's right. Well, one question uh, I'm sure you've been asked before is if people only get one idea from your content, what do you hope it will be?
I always suggest that question. That's a good one because, you probably heard of Dave Ramsey. You
I
heard of
have.
Dave.
Hmm.
Dave happens to be a fan of the QBQ book, but here's the reason, not because John Miller wrote it, but because you can't stay out of debt and manage your money well without an undergirding of personal accountability. The foundation of debt or financial management is personal accountability, taking ownership of your money. And I've been on his show quite a few times, and he always would end with the same question. Well, John, what's the number one idea people get from this book? He'd always ask that. And if you know Dave, he's kind of loud and boisterous. And I'd say, Dave, and now I'm saying, Gary, it's so simple. I didn't invent it. I can only change me. What happens with QBQ is people come into our speaking engagements, our training sessions, they read the book, whatever, and they initially, let's say they know it's about accountability, but what are they thinking about? Who are they thinking about? Their wife needs this, their pastor needs this, their son needs this, their husband needs this. Everybody else needs it. I remember being hired by Meineke, and the president sat in the front row, and he had told me earlier his franchisees needed personal accountability. And about 20 minutes into the session, he later told me he realized that he had hired me for him because he was a father and he was a husband. He needed the message of personal accountability. So the greatest takeaway from this content is I got to stop trying to fix other people around me and just ask, what can I do to change me today?
Mm. And keep asking that question
constantly. Yeah, right. Not a one-time thing.
That's right. That's right. There's so many situations in life that's just going to keep coming at us that give us, I would say, an opportunity to ask that question. So, yeah, I love that.
All the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your message. Your book has impacted me personally, as a person, but also as a leader. And it's been fun to pass the message of this to the people that I lead. And I guess my last question would be, thinking about worship leaders, thinking about church leaders. We all need to be encouraged. We all need to be challenged, in order to grow. So why do you think the QBQ, I'm going to put the link for this book in the show notes. Why do they need to go read this? How will it encourage them? How will it challenge them?
Well, I would say to that question, I know your market is worship leaders, but it's a holistic approach to life. I need to be accountable as a neighbor. I'm pointing to my neighbors over there. I need to be accountable as a husband. I need to be accountable as a grandfather, as a dad. I mean, as a professional speaker. I need to be accountable as a parent. I don't know if you know this, but we have a book called Raising Accountable Kids. And what could be more important than to raise children who don't blame, don't whine, don't complain, but ask, what can I do to contribute to the world, which is what that book's all about. So the reason to read this book is just so I can continue to grow from the inside out. I think it was Jesus who said, before we blame our spouse and try to remove the speck from her eye, maybe we should try to take the beam out of our own. Does that sound familiar at all? Matthew chapter 5. Mm-hmm. And that's what QBQ is all about. Before I complain about my boss or my colleagues or my spouse or my kids, look in the mirror and say, how can I change me today?
Sometimes hard, always necessary. So
yep.
Appreciate.
Ben Franklin once said, if it hurts, it instructs. So if it hurts, we might learn something from it.
That's right. That's all right. That's all right. Well, John, thank you. Thanks for being my friend. Thanks for staying in touch. And thank you for your message and for your time today on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Please add this to your podcast list, review it, and share it with others. And don't forget about Gary's books, More Than a Worship Leader and More Than a Band, available on Amazon today.